Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Opinion Machine, the show where we talk about all things gaming. My name is Killjoy, and today I want to talk about Monster Hunter Rise and my thoughts on it. So recently just got into playing Monster Hunter with Egregious and Fruity and my brother as well. And it is the second Monster Hunter game I have played myself. So I'm what you'd probably call like a Monster Hunter casual. And basically we've been playing through it, and we kind of hit that end of the story progression in the game, and now we're just finishing off quests and doing the special event quests and all that good stuff. So I thought this would be a good time to give my thoughts on this game, and coming at this with two angles, just the game in general, as well as what I kind of think it is this a good game for beginners to get into the series. So let's start off with what I like about this game specifically. So this was obviously designed for the Nintendo Switch. I played the PC version, but what's cool about it is that this version does a lot to somewhat streamline the experience in all the best ways. So that's not to say suddenly the game is going to be easy. If you've never played Monster Hunter, essentially the gameplay loop is you go out into the field to fight a specific monster, and you have to learn their attack patterns and figure out a way to either kill them or capture them to collect parts to build weapons and armor. Basically, it's a very simple loop, but it's quite an effective one. And in this game they do a lot of stuff that I really appreciate as somebody who is much newer to the series. I appreciate it because the only other Monster Hunter game I've played was Monster Hunter Generations. I've not played any of the other games in the series, and there were some things in that game that, I enjoyed the game, but there were things that I was like, this is kind of annoying, and they kind of fixed that in Rise. And so one of the first things that you get in this game is you get this companion dog. It's called a Palamute, and the Palamute allows you to get around the field very fast, and it doesn't drain your stamina, which is good. So you have a stamina and a health bar. Both of those go down depending on certain conditions. But the Palamute lets you get around the map very efficiently, which is great. But one thing the Palamute also lets you do is that you can now sharpen your weapon, because you have to keep your weapons sharp to do the most damage and pierce. You can drink and eat health items, stamina items and stuff like that while on the dog. And the reason why I really appreciate this is that when you are in the middle of battle, especially if you're playing solo, if you've got the aggro on you, it's really hard to drink a potion or eat something to put your stamina up, because it's a very long animation and your character moves very slowly while doing it. You can now sort of jog, but you're not going very fast. Whereas now you can get onto the dog, run around the monster quite efficiently, and then sharpen your blade, drink a potion, do whatever you need to do it. And it's such a minor thing in a lot of ways, but for me personally, I really appreciate that because it just means that you're not a sitting duck, which was always my biggest issue. It's I need to get away from the monster to heal, but I also don't want to run away from the monster completely. And so this is a nice balance where it's I've got to be on the dog first anyway. I've still got to pay attention to what the monster's doing. It's just I move at a speed that I'm okay, I can probably avoid most of the monster's attacks. So the Palamute itself is a really nice addition to the game, and it just means getting around the areas you're in, being able to do use some of those items on the back of the dog. Really, really cool addition, and I think just sort of speeds up the process, because to be honest, sharpening your blade takes ages unless you have certain abilities. And it's sort of things like that where it's for me personally, Monster Hunter is really about getting into the fight, learning the attack patterns, and just sticking with the monster and doing your best not to get knocked out, trying to capture the monster, use the tools you have at your disposal. And that's where a lot of the fun comes. That, and also exploring the areas, which is also good to do. A lot of the things like sharpening the blade, I know why it's there. It's a balancing issue, or not an issue, sorry. It's a balancing part of the gameplay, but it's not something that I really care about. So to be able to speed that process up, or at least make it less dangerous, is that's a welcome change. On top of that, the other big addition to this game is the Wirebug, and probably the biggest addition to the game is the Wirebug. And the Wirebug is essentially, it kind of works like a grappling hook in the sense that it just pulls you along for the most part. It has two uses. It has movement options, and it has options with your weapons. So when you use it, you can, for example, in this game, you can run up a wall, you can run up halfway up the wall, do a flip off the wall, and then chuck out the Wirebug to pull yourself up to the top of a cliff. You can use it in battle to avoid attacks. You can use it to, like, if you get hit by some attacks, you can use it to recover. It's a very versatile a movement ability, and I am all about movement abilities in video games, so I really appreciate it. The other side of it is that you can use it for weapons. I specifically play, or have mostly played, dual blades, which is like a two-handed, like daggers essentially, and that's really cool because what that allows me to do, it gives me one ability, which is to like stab, like do like a explosive stab, and I can't remember what the other ability is. I think it's like a type of dodge, and each weapon has different, what they call silk bind abilities with the Wirebug, and so it adds another layer of combat. So you have all like the classic combat with these weapons, but now you have extra moves that you can now input into your combos. You can, like, some of the moves are like allow you to counter, some allow you to get up into the air. There's just tons of things, and you can unlock different ones as you go. And so those are the two big things in this game that I think really affect the gameplay the most, and probably why Rise is such a not, what's the best way to describe this? Like, it's a bit of a faster experience of you getting into the level and getting into the fight, and then there's a lot more movement-based attacks and things like that with the monsters. On top of that, you can actually ride the monsters in this game because of the Wirebugs, which is kind of fun. So you actually can, like, ride the monsters, fight other monsters with it, and do fun things like that. So the Wirebug is like the main mechanic, but having the Palamute also just adds so many nice touches to the game that it just makes the game have a really nice flow state. You get into combat via the dog. The dog also helps you fight, and then you have the Wirebug to get around and things like that. So those two things are really awesome. Two things that I think really make this game as enjoyable as it has been. On top of that, something else I really enjoy is the big open areas. These were first introduced into Monster Hunter World, but because this was originally designed for the Switch, what they've done the big areas. Like the old games, you have the numbers in those places, but it never loads. There's no loading, and because of that, it also brings on to a little bit of quality of life. You no longer have to, in the old games, you would paintball a monster. You didn't have to, but you would paintball a monster, and you would see where it was going when it left an area. That's all gone. When you enter an area on the map for the first time, you'll see 3 question marks if you've not encountered the monsters before. You go to those question marks, it updates your log. From that point onwards, every time you enter an area with that monster, you will always see where it is, and you always know which area it is. Now, I get it that some people are going to really dislike the fact that that's like a part of it was hunting the monsters, but somebody like me, I really hated all that. So I like the fact that I can go into a level, go, right, he's in area 12, that's where I'm going, and along the way I'm going to grab these items, boom, off I go. And the areas are different and fun. We've got like a big shrine area, you've got your lava area, we've got an icy area, and they all have like different, like, what should we call it? Different levels of height. So you've got verticality in those levels, lots of hidden places to go, and they're just really well designed for the most part. I really enjoy what they the different designs of them, the different monsters that you run into in them, different items, and I think that's a really cool way of doing it. It's like the areas aren't massive, but they are a nice size, and yeah, it's just a lot of fun to be able to go to these different places. And like I said, there's tons of like little secret areas with extra hidden resources and things, so really cool. Overall, there's a ton of quality of life improvements into this game, like being able to move a bit faster while using items. The Wirebug obviously helps with movability, being able to climb up sides of cliffs and things. Like a ton of things that in older Monster Hunter games they kind of removed just to make it, to streamline the experience, to make it so you are interacting with the monsters more efficiently, you're in the fights more efficiently. Stuff that I think really helped the game, and things that I'm glad that they added in, because these games can be quite complicated. So you have the main mechanics of the game going into a fight and fighting a monster, but when outside of the game you then have all the things like upgrading armor, building new armor, upgrading weapons, building new weapons, having to search for types of resources that you're like, oh, I need that to upgrade things. So the game itself is very complicated still. It's not like it's lost any of that complex side to it, because you still have to go out and get the resources. And late game, which is where I've gotten to now, things get a bit nuts with what you need and drop rates and things like that. We'll get onto that in a minute. The game does have tutorials, which is good, and I would say for beginners, this game is easily the best Monster Hunter game to get into. But I would recommend, like, definitely do the single player content. It definitely works like a lower difficulty and builds you up. There are optional tutorials. One of them you will have to do, but the other 3 are optional. Would recommend that you do all of the tutorials. And I think that's one of the things with this game, is that having now played it, this is the Monster Hunter that if I'd started with, like, I'd be like, oh yeah, and then move on to something else like Generations. I think this game does a really good job of it just has a nice feel to it. Like, the controls feel responsive. You have very smooth gameplay, the streamlined, like, quality of life, and not having to, like, paintball the monsters, things like that. Lots of these tweaks you may never known about if you've never played Monster Hunter before, but they've really just focused on a really good core gameplay loop and tried to get you away from maybe some of the more mundane stuff. You can still do some of that outside of combat. Like in this game now, if you collect honey and you have potions on you, it will automatically turn them into mega potions. You don't have to be by the box and crafting that. It's done automatically. So some of the like what I would consider the mundane stuff is great. Same with other types of ammo, things like that. If you find those things in the wild, it'll automatically put it into your inventory. And I really appreciate that. For a beginner, this is a great place to start. You will have those tutorials, like I said. The single player stuff it paces it nicely. There is a lot of information every time you go up a hunter rank in this game that you will come across, where it'll be like, now you can do this, now you can do this. So it's like you can decorate your weapons and add these things. You've got melding pots and the merchant that does this. And a lot of these systems I haven't actually used, to be perfectly honest, because you get a couple of text boxes come up and then it's gone. So those tutorials, I do think I'm kind of like, these kind of suck a little bit. But if you actually spend time with them, they're not so bad. But there is a lot of that, and that happens regularly. So like every time you hit a new hunter rank, it's like, oh, you can now do ramp up weapons, you can now do ramp up skills. You now have these types of items, you now have access to the Meowson areas, you now have access to the submarine. And it keeps adding these extra layers and layers on. Not to the point where it's like, oh my god, this is so overwhelming. But there's a lot to remember. You go, alright, I need to go to the merchant to get some new talismans. I need to go and send the cats out to go and collect me some resources. I also need to trade. You don't have to do any of these, to be fair. You don't have to do any of it. It's just all there. You've got the food part on it, which gives you buffs and things. So there's just a lot of systems in play, and there's a lot of systems that open up as you get higher hunter ranks as well. And I do wish there were more tutorials of that stuff. I think you might be able to read about them in your hunter's notes, but I wish there was almost some like optional videos that you could just watch, just short videos that would explain these things. And I like the fact that they are optional, the tutorial missions. Like one's capturing a monster, wyvern riding. There's one other, I can't remember what it is, but I'm glad that they're there. But I'm glad they're optional, because nobody wants tutorials forced down their throat. But yeah, as a game coming into this, I definitely was like, okay, this is a really good game for beginners. However, there are a couple of gripes that I do have with this game. Nothing major. Let me just put that right now. Nothing major. This game is actually very well put together and it's very enjoyable. It's got a couple of gripes, which you may not come into. One thing that I cannot stand in games is when you kind of get comboed by like these big monsters, but you have no way of, you just can't do anything about it. So each monster has attack patterns in the sense that they have different types of attacks. If you're whacking like a monster in the face, it might do a claw swipe. If you're hitting it in the tail, it will try to slam like its backside on you. If you're far away, it will leap at you. So there's like these different attacks that all these monsters have. Now for the most part, you will eventually learn. Some of the bigger, faster ones, you kind of have to be like, right, when do I attack, when do I don't? You know, maybe I just hit it once or twice, get out of the way, try and trigger it to do certain attacks. Some monsters you can stand by their leg and just keep wailing on them when they try to do certain attacks, like spin attacks and things, because they can't hit you while you're there. But there is occasional times where certain monsters can combo you from full health to death, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. Now, when you get hit by a monster normally, you can Wirebug in any, well, I think it's to the left and the right, but I think you can do it in any direction to pull yourself. You get hit and then you can launch yourself in a direction. You can't always do that because some attacks actually do like a heavy knockdown. There are some times where you will get hit by a monster, put into certain states, and you are just dead. There's nothing you can do about it, and that is incredibly frustrating because at no point should you ever take the control away from the player to the point where you're going to get comboed from 100 health to 0. That does feel cheap at times. Now, this has only happened to me maybe twice in my entire 60 hours of playing the game. So this is at no point like a massive thing in the game, but it can happen, and it feels dirty when it happens. To make the situation worse, sometimes I've gotten stuck, and this has only really happened with one particular monster. I've gotten stuck on the monster's hitbox, so I've tried to escape, gotten stuck on the hitbox, and then just died, and there's nothing I can do about it. And that's frustrating, because now I'm like, well, that wasn't my fault. I couldn't do anything about it, and I've just been comboed to death. And it's one of those moments where you just kind of want to just like put the controller down and walk away, because you're just like, well, this isn't fun. But again, very minor at times. Like, I literally maybe 2 to 3 times has this happened when fighting monsters. So this is not a big problem, but it can happen. But it is very frustrating. The other thing is, with most of these with Monster Hunter, it's kind of got like an MMO grind to it. There's a lot of collecting resources, and late game, which is where I'm sort of at now, the drop rates on some items kind of suck, and you know, it is fun fighting the same monsters, to be fair. I like fighting them, trying to build their armor sets, build their weapon sets. But sometimes when you're like doing it and you need like one item, and you need one of it, and it just, you know, you have to fight it two, 3 times before you get it. It just kind of like, it really slows the game down, which is unfortunate. But again, you might really enjoy that grind. You might really get into it. So it's not so much. It's a very much a personal issue. I don't like it to slow down to like almost a cruel. It's not that bad, to be fair, like, because you can go and fight a ton of other monsters and get these things, and certain items you can get from multiple monsters. So it's not the end of the world. But it's just a little bit like, does it really need to be like a 10% drop? Can it not be just a bit higher? Can I not be guaranteed if I break this part of this monster's leg or face or something? And so yeah, like overall, those are my minor gripes with it. Most of the stuff is minor and very rarely happens. Like, this isn't to say like, oh, this happens a lot. It doesn't. But worth noting, if you are going to play this game, there is a possibility of that happening. But all in all, I think Monster Hunter Rise is a really solid entry into the Monster Hunter series, and it is definitely the place to start if you are a beginner. You will have more things to do and use at your disposal that will make your life playing these games easier. There's a lot of good quality of life improvements in this game, and quite frankly, like, do the single player stuff up until a point, then find a friend and play the multiplayer stuff, because that's where the game really is at its most fun, when you're playing with people that you can talk to and people that enjoy playing the game with you. Like, it's not a bad single player game, and they definitely made the single player feel easier. But the game really shines when you're doing some of those harder quests, and the game can get very difficult, and I think those are some of the most fun ones when you've got a party of 4. Some of the monsters like Magnum Marlowe in this game are a lot of fun to fight. He is hard, but he's a lot of fun to fight. The Bishan is a lot of fun to fight, and then some of the late game like Elder Dragons take a beating, but they are fun to fight, and it's like a endurance at that point. So I've not covered everything in this video. There are other tweaks. Like the sub camps, going back to base, be able to get more items, change items, all this sort of stuff. Like, a lot of things there that really just work incredibly well together. A lot of systems in play. But just for now, I would say I've been enjoying my time on Monster Hunter Rise. I will eventually move on to the expansion soon. So when I get to that, I'll probably do a shorter video about that. But yeah, if you're looking to get into Monster Hunter, this is a great place to start. If you played previous ones and haven't played Rise, I would recommend it. It's a lot of fun. And yeah, there you go. There are my thoughts on Monster Hunter Rise. So thank you very much for watching this video. As always, if you liked the video, hit like. If you want to see more content like this, hit subscribe. Links for Facebook and Twitter will be down below in the description as always. And until next video, I will see you then.